Beneath a sacred gate, the prayers sounded beautiful from above, but below the stone, something was calling back. Thank you for listening, and if you enjoy science fiction with heart, a quick like or subscribe truly helps. Now step into the shadows under the listening gate, where one human surveyor is about to hear what no one was meant to hear. Peter Harlan, step back from the inner threshold. The warning came through the dust in a language that had been polished by priests for 6,000 years. It sounded calm, almost gentle. That was the first thing Peter noticed, because warnings in dangerous ruins were never gentle unless someone wanted you to forget they were threats. He stood 20 feet below the public floor of the listening gate, in a service hollow no pilgrim on Veloria was supposed to know existed. Above him, miles of carved stone and pale glass carried the prayers of a continent toward a ring of white light. Below him, the old machinery of the place hummed like something sleeping badly. Peter did not move back. He kept one gloved hand on the wall and one on the scanner clipped to his belt. The stone under his fingers was cold, but not dead. It trembled with a pulse that had nothing to do with prayer. "Repeat your authorization," the voice said. Peter lifted his eyes toward the dark mouth of the passage. 3 figures stood there in gray robes over armor, their faces hidden behind smooth devotional masks. The masks were beautiful in the way knives could be beautiful. Silver lines ran down from the eye slits like tears. "My authorization is Cultural Survey Permit Earth 712, Peter said. Signed by the Velorian Synod and countersigned by the Council Field Office. I am mapping pre-liturgical damage, not entering an active worship chamber. You are below the permitted level. I am below the level your map claimed was solid stone." The lead guard tilted his masked head. Peter let the silence sit between them. He had spent enough years in forbidden places to know that fear made people talk too much. He was 46, old enough to feel the cold in old injuries, young enough to climb when the route demanded it, and patient enough to let another man decide whether a threat was worth becoming a problem. He looked like what he was, a field surveyor from Earth, worn boots, dust on his jacket, a compact breathing rig across his back, a cutter, a med pack, and enough tools to offend any museum curator in the galaxy. He was not a soldier. He was not a diplomat. He was the kind of man Earth sent when a civilization said, "This place is holy," and the ground underneath it started screaming. The listening gate had been open to off-world scholars for only 3 years. Even then, the Synod allowed them into the outer halls, the translation galleries, and the pilgrim terraces. No one from Earth had been invited below the 7th ring. Peter had found the service hollow because the stone remembered what the priests had tried to forget: old seams, cut marks under ceremonial plating, a draft of stale air moving against the pilgrim ventilation pattern. Then the scanner had picked up voices, not sound, not radio, not anything that should have existed under a temple. The voices had come through the wall in little pulses of heat, weak and broken, as if someone on the other side had been knocking for a very long time. "You will return to the public gallery," the guard said. "Now." Peter was about to answer when the wall behind him opened. No hinge moved, no door slid aside. The circular seam in the stone simply burned white, and the service hollow filled with a wind that smelled of hot rain and metal. Peter dropped to one knee by instinct, one arm across his eyes. A woman fell out of the light. She hit the stone hard and tried to crawl before she had enough breath to stand. Her robe had once been ceremonial blue, layered and fine, but half of it was burned away. One side of her face was streaked with ash. Her skin was pale silver under the dust, and faint lines of blue light ran under it like veins beneath ice. In both hands she clutched a small crystal shard. It glowed weakly between her fingers. The guard surged forward. "Do not touch her," the lead guard ordered. The woman looked at Peter. Her eyes were dark, enormous, and full of a terror that had already moved past fear into certainty. "They are not gods," she said in rough council standard. "They are prisoners." For 1 second, nobody moved. Then the guards drew their restraint rods. Peter moved first. He threw the scanner hard against the wall panel beside the glowing seam. The device cracked open and released a burst of survey powder, a harmless cloud of magnetic dust used to reveal surface etching. In the service hollow, it became a blinding gray storm. The guards shouted. Their devotional masks flared as they tried to adjust. Peter grabbed the woman under one arm. Can you walk? No. Then lie to me better. She forced her knees under her. Peter shoved a breather patch over the burn on her shoulder, hooked his arm around her waist, and half carried her toward the narrow maintenance cut he had mapped 10 minutes earlier. A restraint bolt snapped past his ear and struck the wall. Blue sparks crawled across the stone. "Peter Harlan," the lead guard called through the dust. "You are interfering with sacred custody. I am assisting an injured witness." "She is not a witness. She is a thief." The woman staggered. The crystal in her hands pulsed, and for an instant Peter heard something that was not in the hollow at all. A sound like a crowd praying. Under it, smaller and thinner, a sound like people drowning. Peter pushed the woman through the maintenance cut and followed sideways, scraping his shoulder against the stone. The passage beyond was barely wide enough for him. The woman gasped, but she did not let go of the crystal. "Name," Peter said. "Mara Ven. Peter Harlan. Keep your head down. They will seal the lower turns. I know." "You know the gate?" "I know old buildings that lie about where their doors are." That almost made her look at him like he was mad. Then another bolt struck the wall behind them, and wonder left her face. Peter did not run blindly. He counted steps, watched the ceiling, read the air. The listening gate had been rebuilt so many times that the sacred paths were smooth, but the old service routes still obeyed older logic. Drainage moved down, heat moved up. Emergency cuts followed the pressure ribs. He found the first pressure rib and turned left. Mara saved her breath. They reached a vertical service shaft. Peter clipped a line to the old ladder rail and put Mara's hands around it. "Climb if you can. If you slip, I have you." Her fingers shook so badly he thought she might fall before taking the first rung. Then she looked down at the crystal and pressed it to her chest. "I carried them this far," she whispered. "I can carry them higher." She climbed. That was when Peter began to understand that Mara Ven was not fragile. She was broken in places, but not fragile. There was a difference. At the top, the shaft opened behind a carved glass screen at the edge of the pilgrim hall. The public song rolled over them, bright and steady, while Mara tried to pull away from Peter. "Do not listen," she said. "To what?" "To us." The crystal flared. For half a breath, the white ring above the pilgrim hall changed. Peter saw through it, or thought he did. He saw bodies suspended in chambers of light, thin limbs folded tight, faces turned away from a brightness that never let them sleep. Each prayer rose like a thread and wrapped around them. Each word tightened. Each loving plea became another lock. Then the vision was gone. The pilgrims were still singing. Mara made a sound as if something inside her had torn. Peter tightened his grip on her arm and led her through the crowd. The guards could not fire into worshippers. Not yet. He used that. He hated using it, but he used it. At the outer terrace, his survey rover waited under a veil of red dust. He got Mara into the passenger seat, slammed his palm against the manual ignition, and drove before the temple gates finished closing. Behind them, the listening gate rose from the desert like a crown made for a dead giant. Its ring of white light shone against the violet dawn. Mara looked back once. "They heard me for years," she said. Peter kept the rover low and fast through the broken stone field. "Who did?" "The ones inside." Her hands closed around the crystal. "And every time I prayed, I thought I was comforting gods." The first synod flyer lifted from the temple roof. Peter switched off the rover's beacon, cut hard into a canyon, and let the dust swallow them. "No more talking until I get us out of range," he said. Mara nodded, but tears slid down her face without sound. Peter did not tell her it would be all right. People said that when they needed the world to be smaller than it was. He only drove, one eye on the canyon walls, one ear on the flyer's sweep above them, and one hand steady on the wheel as Veloria began to close around them. Harbor 9 did not look like a place that could make the galaxy angry. It was the Earth humanitarian station Peter had been trying to reach since the canyon, the one place nearby with the authority to open a sanctuary file and the stubbornness to keep it open. It hung at the edge of Velorian space like an old metal seed, small and plain. Its Earth registry lights half dim from years of dust. It had no warship escort, no grand embassy towers, no marble chamber for speeches. It was a humanitarian station with 4 docking arms, 2 medical bays, a legal office no bigger than a cargo lift, and a mess hall that smelled faintly of coffee no matter what hour it was. To Peter, that made it one of the most important places in the region. Harbor 9 was where Earth sent the people nobody wanted to classify. Runaway workers without recognized contracts, children born on ships that denied ownership, refugees whose governments insisted they were criminals, pilgrims who crossed borders and found the border had moved behind them. The council called it a temporary intake platform. Earth staff called it a door. Peter brought the rover into the lower cargo lock with one Synod flyer still searching the canyon grid behind them. He had already dumped the rover's official beacon, burned his permit chip, and sent an emergency sanctuary flag on a tight beam to the station. By the time the lock sealed, Dr. Lena Ortiz was waiting with 2 medtechs and a stretcher. Lena took one look at Mara and stopped asking questions. Burn trauma, energy exposure, shock, she said. Peter, are you hit? No. That was not an answer. It can wait. No, it cannot. It just will. She pointed to the stretcher. Put her down. Mara refused to release the crystal. Lena's voice softened. I am not taking it from you. They will come for it. Then they can explain to my face why an injured woman does not get a bed. Mara looked at Peter. He nodded. Only then did she let the medtechs lift her. Within 30 minutes, Harbor 9 had 3 incoming demands. 2 council inquiries, 1 Synod accusation of religious theft, and a media leak that described Peter Harlan as an earth surveyor who had abducted a senior Velorian priestess from a restricted shrine. Mara woke in a white medical room under a ceiling too low for Velorian architecture. On Veloria, sacred rooms rose tall enough to make a person feel small beneath the gods. Harbor 9 had no space for that. Its rooms were practical, human-scaled, and built for hands that needed to reach things quickly. Peter was sitting by the door, not too close, not too far. Mara turned her head. Her voice came out dry. Did I die? No. Is this Earth? Not yet. Earth Station. Harbor 9. Her eyes closed. A threshold. Yes. Will they send me back? Peter did not answer quickly. She seemed to respect that more than comfort. They will try, he said. Earth has opened a sanctuary file. I signed the witness guarantee. What does that mean? It means I told them you have evidence of an ongoing crime and that returning you would put you in danger. And if I am lying, then my career gets very short. Mara studied him. Why would you do that? Because I saw enough. You saw a shard, a wound, a frightened woman. I saw restraint rods pointed at a patient. I saw temple guards fire through a service passage. I saw your gate answer prayer with pain. Mara looked away. I was 6 when I first heard the gods, she said. Peter stayed quiet. My mother took me to the upper ring during the winter famine. The city lights were failing. People were afraid. The priests told us the gods were resting beyond the white ring and that our prayers gave them strength to protect us. I remember thinking it was beautiful that a child could help a god. Her fingers tightened on the blanket. When I was 12, they said my voice carried well through the gate. When I was 20, I led my first vigil. By 30, I was teaching children the response lines. She swallowed. I taught them to love the lock. Mara turned back to him. Do not tell me it was not my fault. I was not going to. Pain crossed her face, but she did not look away. Peter leaned forward, elbows on knees. You were lied to. That matters. It does not erase what happened. That also matters. The question is what you do now that you know. She breathed in. The monitor beside her bed flickered with the effort. The shard chose me, she said. I thought I stole it, but it opened when I touched the inner glass. Something inside pushed memory into my hands. Something? Someone. Lena entered before Peter could ask more. She carried the crystal shard in a transparent field case. I need both of you to see this, she said. Ruth Kwan, Harbor 9's administrator, followed her, along with a station linguist named Amos Teague, a thin man with tired eyes and a habit of rubbing his thumb against his fingers when thinking. They dimmed the room and opened the field case. The shard rose an inch above its cradle. Light spilled across the wall. At first, Peter saw only broken images. A corridor of pale glass, figures with long limbs and translucent skin moving through a storm. A child carried against someone's chest. A doorway opening into shelter. Then the memory shifted. The same figures, older, thinner, suspended in chambers. Velorian symbols carved around them. Not the symbols Peter had seen in the public hall, but older forms, less graceful, more direct. Amos whispered, "That is not a prayer." Mara stared at the wall. "Read it." His voice shook. "Hold, draw, seal, repeat." The light changed again. Now there was sound. Millions of voices lifted in worship. Under them, faint and nearly lost, a single voice spoke from inside the shard. It did not use council standard. It used something older, carried not by sound, but by heat and rhythm. Amos struggled to translate. "Not God's," he said. "Not asleep. Still here. Still here. Still here." Mara covered her mouth. The shard flickered. One more memory emerged, weak but clear. Mara's own voice, years younger, leading a vigil. Then a sentence that did not fit the formal chant. "For those who suffer unnamed, let mercy find them." Mara froze. Peter looked at her. "That is not in the vigil," she whispered. "I added it once. There had been a mining collapse. The Synod told us not to mention the dead because their families had not paid for public rites. I was angry. I added the line." In the shard, the hidden voice responded across years of imprisonment. "Heard." The light went out. No one spoke for a long moment. Then Ruth's tablet chimed. She looked down, and her mouth tightened. "The council has issued a hold order. Mara is not to make public statements. The shard is to be transferred to neutral custody within 12 hours. "Neutral custody," Peter said. Ruth nodded. "A sealed archive on a council carrier, where evidence goes quiet until everyone forgets it was evidence. Lena closed the field case. Not while it is in my medical bay." Amos looked pale. "If the translation is right, the gate is not a temple. It is a prison." Mara spoke without lifting her eyes. "No," she said. "It was a refuge first." Peter heard the difference in her voice. "Not fear now. Horror with a shape." "How do you know?" "Because the oldest word on the wall is not gate. It is shelter." The story spread before the proof did. The council field office requested a remote hearing. Ruth refused to call it that. "It is not a hearing," she told Peter. "It is a pressure room with better lighting." By then, everyone on Harbor 9 understood the point of the hearing. The council was not trying to discover the truth quickly. It was trying to delay long enough for the final vigil to make the truth harder to prove. They gathered in Harbor 9's communications bay. Ruth, Peter, Lena, Amos, and Mara, who insisted on standing despite Lena's objections. She wore plain gray station clothing now. Without her burned blue robes, she looked smaller, but also more real. 3 council representatives appeared in a wall projection. Their images were clean, distant, and perfectly centered. The middle one introduced himself as council mediator Soren Vale. Peter disliked him at once, then warned himself that dislike was not evidence. Vale spoke softly. Earth's humanitarian impulse is understood. However, Veloria is a sovereign member system with complex religious infrastructure. A premature accusation could lead to planetary unrest. Mara flinched at the word infrastructure. Peter saw it. Vale did not. Ruth said, "We have an injured witness and evidence of sentient imprisonment. You have an unverified memory artifact from a restricted shrine. We have scans, collected outside permit boundaries." Peter said, because the restricted boundary was hiding a service level full of living evidence. Vale turned his perfect face toward him. "Mr. Harlan, your personal conduct is under review. I advise caution." Peter almost smiled. "I have been advised." Vale continued. "The council is not refusing concern. We are asking Earth to preserve stability while a neutral committee determines cultural and technical facts." "How long? Such matters cannot be rushed. How long?" Vale paused. "Preliminary review may take 6 standard months." Mara made a small sound. Peter looked at her. She was staring at the projection as if Vale had just pronounced a death sentence in a polite voice. "They do not have 6 months, she said. Vale's expression did not change. "Priestess Ven, your emotional state is understandable, but your statements may inflame a delicate situation." Vale shifted tactics. "The Synod has also informed us of an upcoming planetary rite, the final vigil. Interference at this time could risk energy disruption across several Velorian cities." Peter turned to Amos. Amos was already working, fingers flying over the translation screen. The phrase final vigil appeared in 3 layers of Velorian script. The public meaning was beautiful. Renewal of the divine light, binding of heaven to the living world. The older command beneath it was uglier. Seal remainder. Burn memory. Complete hold. Amos whispered, "Peter, I see it." Mara's face had gone blank in a way Peter recognized from disaster sites. Not calm, shock putting a hand over the mouth of the soul. The final vigil is in 4 days, she said. All Veloria will pray. Peter looked back at Vale. That rite will destroy evidence and may kill the people inside. That is your interpretation. It is the translation. It is an unauthorized translation of sacred text. Mara laughed once. It was a broken sound. Vale looked offended. Ruth leaned toward the pickup. Earth will not transfer Mara Ven or the shard until the sanctuary review is complete. Vale's softness thinned. If Earth refuses neutral custody, the Council may suspend Earth relief operations in the Velorian corridor pending investigation. That landed. Everyone in the room understood what it meant. Harbor 9 supported more than Mara. Earth medical boats were moving through that corridor every week, treating outbreaks, evacuating stranded crews, carrying food to communities the larger systems did not find profitable enough to save. Peter felt the weight of it settle into the room. Mara understood too. She turned toward Ruth. "No," she said. "Do not risk them for me." Ruth answered before Peter could. "It is not only for you." Mara looked lost. Peter said, "That is what they are counting on. They want every life tied to another life until helping anyone looks like harming someone else." After the link ended, Mara sat down as if her bones had finally remembered gravity. "They will make Earth pay," she said. "Yes," Ruth said. "Then send me away." "No. Send the shard without me. Say I lied. Say I was fevered. Save your corridor." Peter crouched in front of her chair so she did not have to look up. "Listen to me. You are not a debt Harbor 9 took on by mistake." Her eyes were wet, but her voice sharpened. "And those other ships? The children waiting for medicine? The crews waiting for rescue? Are they mistakes? No. Then do not make me the reason they suffer." Peter held her gaze. "You are not the reason. The people threatening them are the reason." Mara looked away. He lowered his voice. "Earth has a word for what you are asking. It is not sacrifice. It is surrender disguised as mercy." That reached her. He saw it hurt because it was true. Later, after Lena cleared Mara to leave the medical room for 1 hour, Peter helped her down the short corridor to the translation bay. Amos was waiting there with the oldest map, not in the official archive, not in the shard's main memory. It was hidden in the gate's maintenance geometry, stored in the negative spaces of the carvings Peter had scanned below the 7th ring. The listening gate had once been named in a language older than Veloria's priesthood. Amos could not translate the sound cleanly, so he gave them the meaning. The place that keeps the lost alive until morning. Mara stood over the map for a long time. "Not a temple," she said. "No," Amos replied. "A shelter." The map showed arrival chambers, medical pools, resting cells, a guidance beacon aimed at deep space. It showed the Illyri entering during a catastrophe Peter could not yet understand. Then later layers showed Velorian modifications, energy taps, prayer conduits, command rings. Peter traced one line with his finger. This was a refugee intake system. Ruth looked at him, and it became a power plant. Mara's face folded with grief. "My people built cities on them." No one contradicted her. Peter wished they could. He wished the truth were smaller, cleaner, easier to hold. Mara touched the oldest word on the screen. "Shelter," she whispered. "We turned a shelter into a prison." "What opens it?" he asked. Amos brought up the ritual layers. "The public prayers keep the current steady. The final vigil will flood the core. Once that happens, the remaining memory signatures will be burned into the system. Some bodies may survive for a while, but the minds may be erased. Some may not survive the flood at all." He did not finish. Mara did. "They will become what we called them. Light with no voice." Peter studied the map. "Can we open the core without cutting power to the cities?" Amos gave a tired laugh. "I translate dead grammar. I do not perform miracles." "Mara?" She wiped her face with both hands and leaned closer. The original rite was not worship. It was a release sequence, a way for those inside shelter to signal readiness. The Synod inverted it, slowed it, turned the response lines into holding commands. "Can you reverse it?" She closed her eyes. Her lips moved without sound, following a rhythm older than her shame. "Not alone." "What do you need?" "A stabilizer at the core. Someone must hold the gate between lock and release while I read. If the balance fails, the core will either seal or drain." "Drain into what?" "Veloria." Peter looked at the map again. Millions of lives sat on the other side of that word. "So we cannot just break the lock?" "No." "Good," he said. Mara looked at him as if good was a cruel word. Amos nodded slowly. The old system could transfer load in stages. Can Harbor 9 model it? With every processor we have and several prayers I do not officially believe in. Mara stared at the map. Peter saw the decision forming before she said it. I have to go back. No, Lena said from the doorway. She had come in silently. Your blood chemistry is still unstable. Your burns reopen if you stand too long. Your nervous system is carrying energy feedback I do not have a name for. Mara did not turn. Can someone else read the right? Amos looked at the text, then at her. No. Then I have to go back. Peter said, You still have a choice. She faced him then, and her expression was not fear. It was grief learning how to stand. I know. That is why this is mine to choose. Ruth sent the request to Earth Command under a humanitarian emergency header. She did not ask for warships. She asked for medical evacuation authority, sanctuary expansion, and permission to keep Harbor 9 open if Council sanctions came down. The answer arrived 2 hours later. Peter was in the equipment bay, checking old climbing lines and replacing the cracked scanner he had thrown in the temple hollow when Ruth walked in. Earth answered, she said. And? Harbor 9 remains open. Mara's sanctuary file stands. The Illyri, if recovered alive, qualify for emergency medical protection. Earth relief ships in the corridor are to continue operations unless physically blocked. Peter let out a breath he had not meant to hold. Ruth continued, They also included a warning. If you return to Veloria, Earth cannot guarantee Council protection. Your permit is gone. If you are caught, the Synod will call you a criminal and the Council may let that stand. Peter clipped the scanner to his belt. Understood. You could stay. Advise from here. Would that open the core? No. Then I am going. Ruth looked at him the way administrators looked at men who made their paperwork harder and their stations worth having. Peter, he turned. If this goes wrong, Earth will still stand behind the sanctuary decision, but it may not be able to stand between you and every consequence. I know. Do you? Peter thought of Mara in the medical bay, practicing a prayer she had once loved and now feared. He thought of the voices under the light. Still here. Still here. Still here. Ruth, I have spent half my life cataloging ruins made by people who thought someone else would do the brave part later. I am tired of reading their excuses off walls. She held his gaze, then nodded once. Bring them home. The move from Harbor 9 back toward Veloria happened without banners. A small Earth medical ship, the Mercy Finch, filed a routine corridor request for humanitarian standby near the planet. It was the evacuation door if Peter and Mara could open the gate, and the only medical help the Illyri would have if they came out alive. Its captain kept the transponder honest, because a hospital ship did not need to lie about being a hospital ship. Its cargo hold carried 6 trauma beds, portable darkness tents for patients who were sensitive to light, nutrient suspension tanks, and blank sanctuary bracelets waiting for names. The Mercy Finch cut its engines behind a dead moonlit. From there, Peter and Mara took a survey skiff down through a storm front to the desert canyons near the listening gate. Amos stayed aboard to monitor translation layers. Lena stayed because there was no room in the skiff, and because she threatened Peter with 3 specific medical procedures if he let Mara die. The skiff landed hard in a canyon full of red dust. Peter checked the horizon. The listening gate was visible in the distance, its white ring brighter than before. The final vigil had begun. Across Veloria, cities were dimming their outer lights so every household could face the gate. Every prayer, every hope, every fear would be poured into the ring. Mara heard it before Peter's instruments did. She put a hand against the canyon wall. They are singing. Peter listened. At first there was only wind, then he felt it through his boots. A vibration moving through the stone. A planet praying. Mara's face tightened. From the canyon floor, they entered the old service route that ran beneath the ritual approaches. The same maintenance logic that had saved them before now led them deeper. Peter moved first, testing the floor, marking unstable plates, cutting through mineral growth only when he had to. Mara followed, one hand on the wall, lips moving as she counted the old rhythm of the gate. Twice they hid from Synod patrols moving through the lower ribs. The service route ended at the first ritual door. It was not a door in any human sense. It was a membrane of white light stretched across a ring of black stone. The public chant above fed into it, line by line. Mara stared at the symbols rotating around the ring. I used to think this was beautiful. What is it? A filter. It turns devotion into command. Can you open it? Not open. Persuade. She stepped forward. Peter caught her wrist. Anything I should know before you persuade the glowing wall? If I say the wrong line, it will mark us as offerings. Good to know, Peter said. Mara placed her palm against the light and spoke a phrase Peter had heard in the shard. Her voice trembled at first. The membrane brightened. Symbols shifted. For a moment the air smelled of rain. Then the door opened. They passed through 3 more rings, each colder than the last. The deeper they went, the less the gate felt like a temple. The carvings became practical. Flow marks, medical diagrams, shelter instructions. Old warnings to keep the wounded in darkness and never expose the Illyri to sustained white light. Peter stopped at one wall and brushed dust from a carving half buried under a later prayer seal. Mara, she turned. The carving showed a tall figure bending over a smaller one, not in worship, but a blanket, a vessel of water, a hand held near a face. Mara touched the image with 2 fingers. We forgot this. No, Peter said. Someone buried it. They moved on. Above them, the final vigil rose. Millions of Velorian voices poured through the gate. The sound entered the lower levels as pressure. Peter's teeth ached from it. Mara stumbled twice. Each time she pushed herself up before he could lift her. At the last service bridge, Synod guards found them. The lead guard was the same one from the lower hollow. His mask was gone now. His face was narrow, silver-skinned like Mara's, with ritual scars down both cheeks. Priestess Ven, he said, you have done enough damage. Mara straightened. I have not done enough. He looked at Peter. And you, Earth has been ordered to withdraw its relief vessel. You are trespassing in a sovereign holy site. Peter looked past him. 4 guards, narrow bridge, drop on both sides into a light well, no cover. Mara exhausted, his own left hand burned and nearly useless. Your holy site has medical shelter symbols under the prayer seals, Peter said. Do your pilgrims know that? The guard's jaw tightened. You have no right to interpret our gods. They are not your gods. The guard raised his rod. Peter did not wait. He kicked a loose survey marker across the bridge. The guard looked down by reflex. Peter threw his cutter, not at the guard, but at the bridge anchor above him. The old metal snapped. The bridge lurched sideways. 2 guards fell against the rail. Peter slammed into the lead guard low, driving him back just enough for Mara to pass. A restraint bolt hit Peter in the ribs. Pain flashed white. His left leg went numb, then half woke again. Peter? Move. Mara moved. Peter caught the lead guard's wrist before the rod came down again, twisted, and drove the man against the wall. He did not kill him. He did not need to. He locked the guard's own restraint cuff around the bridge rail and kicked the rod into the light well. The other guards regained footing. Peter grabbed Mara's hand and ran. Beyond the broken bridge, the last passage led inward. It was not built for worshippers. It was built for attendants moving between shelter cells. The air there was freezing. The walls were transparent in places, and beyond them, Peter saw the core. The Illyri hung in chambers of white light. Dozens at first, then hundreds as the passage curved. Thin bodies folded around themselves, skin like smoke under glass, long fingers curled against palms. Faces turned away from the brightness. Some chambers were empty except for ash-colored residue. Peter did not let himself count those. Mara stopped dead. The sound that came from her was not a sob. It was worse. It was recognition. I sang here, she said. Every year, my voice came here. Peter wanted to give her time. There was none. Can they hear you now? Mara wiped her face hard. Yes. Then let them hear the truth. The core chamber opened below them, a vast circular space around a pillar of white fire. At the far side, ancient control ribs rose from the floor like black roots. Above, the final vigil thundered through the stone. Amos spoke through Peter's earpiece, his signal broken by interference. Peter, the prayer load is spiking. You have maybe 11 minutes before the seal completes. Stabilizer point? South rib, 3rd root from center. It will look like a handprint well. Peter saw it. A dark recess at the base of the control ribs, shaped for hands much longer than his. Mara, the reading position? She pointed to a raised circle at the edge of the pillar. There. Can you reach it? Yes. They descended. Mara stepped onto the reading circle. Every chamber in the core brightened. The Illyri moved. Not much. A finger. A mouth opening without sound. Mara's whole body shook. Peter reached the stabilizer well and looked back at her. "Do not pray to them," he said. Her eyes found his. "Call to them." She nodded. Peter put both hands into the well. Pain took him apart. The core shifted. The pillar of white fire split into strands. Mara began to speak. At first, Peter did not understand the words. They were older than modern Velorian, older than the Synod, older than the lie. But he understood the shape. It was not a hymn. It was an intake call. A shelter keeper's voice asking those inside if they were alive, if they could hear, if they were ready to leave. Then the final vigil struck from above. Millions of voices crashed into the core. The strands of light whipped around the chambers. The Illyri arched in pain. Peter felt the stabilizer well drag at his hands, trying to close. "Peter," Amos shouted in his ear. "Council order just hit the Mercy Finch. They are demanding immediate withdrawal." Peter could barely speak. "Captain?" A new voice answered, calm and close. "Mercy Finch to Peter Harlan. We are holding position. You will be sanctioned. We are a hospital ship. They can file complaints with the empty beds." The line crackled out. Peter laughed once, and the laugh became a groan. Mara's voice faltered as the prayer load rose. "I cannot hold it," she said. Peter forced his head up. "Yes, you can. They are screaming. Then answer them with something true." "I did this to them." "No." His voice was rough now. "You found them. Now keep the door open." The core shook. Stone cracked overhead. Mara closed her eyes. When she spoke again, she changed the line. Peter felt the difference in the stabilizer, not as command, but as release. "For those who suffer unnamed," she said in the old tongue, then in Council Standard, then in Velorian, so every hidden recorder could hear, "Mercy has found you." The first chamber opened. The Illyri inside fell forward, weightless for a second, then collapsed onto the floor. Thor. Peter saw a thin body curl in terror away from the light. Mara stepped off the reading circle toward them. "Stay," Peter gasped. "Keep reading. I cannot leave them. If you stop, you lose all of them." That was the cruelty of the moment. Mara understood it. Her face broke, then hardened into something stronger than grief. She went back to the circle. The Synod guards reached the upper platform. The lead guard, cuff still hanging from one wrist, shouted for the core to be sealed. Mara raised her voice. The old shelter call rolled through the chamber. More chambers opened. Peter's hands were numb now. His arms shook uncontrollably. The stabilizer well was burning through the glove into skin. He thought briefly of every ruin he had ever cataloged, every carved apology from a civilization that had discovered morality only after the dead stopped needing it. Not here, he thought. Not this time. A figure appeared inside the nearest chamber. And Illyri, older than the others or only more worn, opened their eyes. They were dark, clear, and terribly awake. They looked at Mara. Their lips moved. Mara almost missed the next line. The word came through the chamber speaker in a voice like dry leaves. "Heard." Mara stared at them. The Illyri spoke again, this time in a broken echo of her own language. "You called the unnamed." The chamber opened. Mara sobbed once, but she kept reading. The core did not explode. It did not collapse. It changed. The white fire softened to gold. The prayer conduits above the chamber, overloaded by their own inversion, began to fail one by one. Across Veloria, the final vigil did not end all at once. It stuttered. Millions of worshippers heard, inside their sacred chant, another sound. Not divine thunder. Voices. Weak voices. Frightened voices. Living voices. The Synod could not hide them fast enough. On the Mercy Finch, Captain Adebayo opened every humanitarian channel Earth possessed and transmitted medical status, not accusation. No speeches, no condemnation, just images of bodies emerging from chambers, vital signs failing, trauma calls, requests for safe passage. The galaxy could argue with doctrine. It was harder to argue with a patient gasping under a rescue blanket on an open medical channel. Peter did not know when he fell. One moment his hands were in the stabilizer well. The next he was on the core floor, looking up at Mara's face. She was saying his name. That seemed unnecessary. He knew his name. Still, it was good to hear. "Did it open?" he asked. Mara's answer came through tears. Enough. The Mercy Finch filled every bed. The first Illyri brought aboard tried to crawl under the stretcher when the medical bay lights came on. Lena ordered half the lamps shut off and turned the bay into soft shadow. Though one Illyri reached toward the dark like it was water. Another kept whispering a name no translator could catch. Amos sat beside them for an hour, repeating sounds gently until the translation system found enough pattern to help. The name was Sava. Once the first name came, more followed. Not all. Some memories were too damaged. Some voices were gone. But names began to return in fragments, and each one changed the room. They were no longer divine vessels. They were Sava, Naren, Olin, Ve, people with mouths too dry to speak and hands that flinched when touched too quickly. An Illyri in the nearest darkness tent turned their face toward Mara. It was the one who had spoken in the core. Their recovered name was Sava. Mara bowed her head. I thought you were gods. The translator struggled with Sava's answer, but the meaning came through. We knew. I prayed to you. We heard. I helped hold you there. Sava's long fingers shifted on the blanket. Lena started to intervene, but Peter, lying 2 beds down with both hands wrapped and his ribs taped, shook his head slightly. Sava touched Mara's wrist, right above the burned strip of blue robe. You also called the unnamed. Mara broke then, quietly, without performance. She bent over her hands and wept like someone who had been carrying a temple on her back and had finally been allowed to set it down. Peter closed his eyes. For a few minutes, that was enough. The council sanctions arrived before the Mercy Finch reached Harbor 9. Earth relief operations in the Velorian corridor were suspended pending review. Peter Harlan's council survey license was revoked. Harbor 9 was ordered not to process additional Velorian asylum requests until jurisdictional clarity was established. Ruth Kwan read the message in the docking bay while stretchers came off the Mercy Finch behind her. Then she looked at the council courier drone and said, Receipt acknowledged. Do you intend to comply? The drone asked. Ruth glanced back. The first Illyri stretcher passed into Harbor 9. Sava lay under a dark medical hood, one hand visible, fingers curled around the edge of a blanket marked with the blue Earth Relief emblem. Mara walked beside them, pale and shaking, but upright. Peter came last, because Lena had sedated him enough to stop him arguing and not enough to stop him looking annoyed. Ruth turned back to the drone. Harbor 9 will continue emergency intake for living patients. That may be recorded as non-compliance. Then spell my name right, Ruth said. The drone withdrew. The station did what small human stations had always done when large systems became cruel. It made room. The galaxy argued outside. Inside Harbor 9, the Illyri learned that night could be gentle. When he woke, Mara was sitting by the window at the end of the ward. Harbor 9 had no real windows, only display panels showing external feeds, but someone had patched through a live view of Earth. It hung blue and white in the distance, impossibly soft after the hard light of Veloria. Peter walked over slowly, one hand bandaged, ribs complaining with every breath. Mara did not turn. Is that Earth? Yes. It looks fragile. It is. She looked at him then. That does not frighten you? Every day. But you still open doors. Peter lowered himself into the chair beside her. Not always. Not enough. We fail plenty. Then why does your world keep trying? He watched the blue planet turn on the screen. No ring of white light, no prayer conduits, no perfect civilization. Just storms, oceans, cities, borders, mistakes, stubborn kindness, and more graves than anyone could count. Maybe because we know what it is like to be fragile, he said. Mara looked back at Earth for a long time. What will happen to you? My license is gone. Can it be restored? Maybe. Maybe not. You lost your work because of me. Peter shook his head. I lost a license because of them. I kept my work. She did not understand. He lifted his bandaged hand slightly toward the ward, where Illyri slept under dim lights and station blankets. This was the work. Mara's face changed. Grief did not leave it. It made room for something else. A week later, the first group of Illyri were moved from Harbor 9 to Earth. They landed at dawn in a valley hospital, converted into a sanctuary center. The building had been a mountain retreat once, then a disaster recovery site, then nothing for a while. Now its windows were shaded, its rooms quiet, its gardens covered with cloth awnings so the Illyri could feel wind without being hurt by too much light. No crowd waited on the landing field. Ruth had forbidden ceremonies. Lena had threatened to personally sedate any official who tried to welcome traumatized patients with music. There were doctors, translators, a few Earth relief workers, and Peter standing with one arm in a sling because he had ignored too many instructions to stay in bed. Mara stepped down from the transport behind Sava. For a moment, no one moved. The Illyri looked at the sky. not a ceiling of white fire. Not a ring, not the inside of a chamber, a sky. Blue, open, crossed by slow clouds that did not demand anything from them. Sava sank to their knees. Mara started forward, afraid they were falling, but Sava only placed one thin hand on the grass. Cold, the translator said after a pause, then corrected itself. Alive. One by one, the Illyri touched the ground. Peter saw an earth nurse crying and pretending not to. Mara stood apart, her burned strip of blue cloth tied around her wrist. She had refused to wear her old robes. She had not thrown them away either. Peter understood that. Some things had to be carried until they could be changed into something else. Sava turned to her. The translator spoke slowly. Will there be prayers here? Mara looked toward Peter, then back to Sava. Only if you ask for them. Sava considered that. No locks. No locks, Mara said. Later that day, in a quiet room with shaded windows, Mara asked for the recovered names. Not all of them were complete. Some were fragments. Some had two possible sounds. Amos, working remotely from Harbor 9, sent every version with careful notes. Mara wrote them by hand because she said speaking them should not be the first time she touched them. Peter found her at a table near the garden, copying names with slow precision. You do not have to do them all today. I know. That means you are allowed to stop. I know that too. He sat across from her. For a while he listened to the scratch of the pen. You once asked if Earth was a threshold, he said. She did not look up. Yes, it is more like a porch. That made her pause. A porch? A place before the inside. Not safety by itself, but a place where someone can sit beside you before you decide whether you can enter. Mara thought about that. Your metaphors are very human. I hope so. She looked at the list. I do not know what I am now. Good. That is a strange answer. It means the Synod does not get to decide for you. Her eyes lifted. Do you still believe? He asked. Mara looked through the shaded window at the Illyri in the garden. Sava sat with two others under a cloth canopy, one hand still touching the grass. I believe prayer that locks a door is not prayer, she said. I believe a name is holier than a title. I believe mercy that costs nothing has not yet been tested. Peter nodded. That is enough for today. The naming was not a ceremony. Mara insisted on that. No altar, no raised platform, no sacred ring, no music, just a quiet room with the doors open to the garden and earth light softened by white cloth. The Illyri who could sit came in wheelchairs or on low beds. Those too weak to come listened through room speakers. Doctors stayed near the walls. Translators waited. Peter stood in the back because he thought the moment belonged to them. Mara stood at the front with a sheet of paper in both hands. She was trembling. Sava reached out from the first chair and touched her sleeve. Mara breathed. For most of my life, she said, I was taught to speak upward, to send my voice into light, to call those beyond the gate by names they never chose. She stopped. The room was utterly still. I cannot undo the years. I cannot give back what was taken. I cannot make my people understand in a day what was hidden from us for generations. I can only begin where the lie should have ended. She looked at the first name. Sava. The Illyri in the first chair closed their eyes. Naren. A second Illyri made a small sound like a breath finding a body. Olan, Ve, Tamar, Leo. Some names came whole, some came as fragments. When Mara reached the uncertain ones, she did not pretend certainty. She read each possible sound gently and promised the rest would be searched for. No one called them gods. No one knelt. No one asked them to bless Earth. Outside, beyond the open doors, clouds moved over the valley. A breeze entered the room and shifted the paper in Mara's hands. Peter watched her reach the last line. For those whose names are still missing, Mara said, her voice breaking but not falling apart, we will keep looking. Solo, you will not be called light because we are too afraid to call you lost. You will not be called holy because we are too ashamed to call you harmed. You will not be asked to carry our prayers before you have carried your own life. She lowered the paper. Sava lifted one hand. The translator took a moment. Again, it said finally. Mara did not understand. Again? Sava touched their own chest. Name again. Mara smiled through tears. Sava. This time Sava repeated it. Not perfectly, not strongly, but with ownership. Sava. One by one, others followed. The room filled with names returning to their owners. Peter stepped back into the hall before anyone could see what it did to him. He found Lena there, leaning against the wall with her arms folded. You crying, Harlan? No, Good. Me neither. They stood together in the hall, listening to the sound of people becoming people again. Weeks later, the council would open an investigation it could no longer avoid. Months later, the Velorian Synod would fracture between those who wanted to preserve the lie and those who could not keep praying after hearing the voices. Years later, perhaps, Veloria would have to rebuild its cities without a prison at the heart of them. Peter did not know how much justice the galaxy would allow. But that morning, under an Earth sky, justice did not look like a verdict. It looked like a medical bed in a quiet room. It looked like a former priestess reading names with both hands shaking. It looked like a station administrator spelling her name for a sanctions notice, a hospital ship refusing to abandon open beds, and a man with burned hands standing behind the people he had promised not to leave. Most of all, it looked like the Illyri sleeping at last in a place where nobody needed them to be gods. Only alive, only safe, only themselves. That is where this story leaves us. Not in a council chamber, not in a hall of judgment, under an open sky on Earth, where the beings once called gods were finally allowed to be tired, frightened, wounded, and real. Peter Harlan did not save them because it was easy. Earth did not shelter them because the galaxy approved. They did it because when every powerful voice found a reason to wait, someone still had to open the door. And sometimes that is humanity at its best. Not the loudest species, not the strongest empire, just the one place in the dark where a hunted life can still hear the words, "You are safe now." If this story moved you, please leave a like, share it with someone who loves science fiction with heart, and subscribe for more stories about humanity standing where the rest of the galaxy would not. Thank you for listening. And until the next story, remember this: no one should have to become a god just to be worth saving.